We've been spending this month learning about plants and seeds and trees, and I wanted to read you a story about how apples grow. You've been reading another book this week called The Giving Tree, which was about an apple tree that was very generous in how it gave to the boy over the years. And so this is a true story about an apple tree. It's an informational story because it tells you facts and things that can help you understand how apple trees grow. So this is titled How Do Apple Trees Grow? And it is written by Betsy Maestro and illustrated by Julio Maestro. When you bite into a juicy apple, you're eating part of a flower. Fruit comes from flowers. In winter, an apple tree is bare. It's hard to imagine it covered with flowers or fruit. But even in the cold and snow, tiny leaf buds and flower buds are waiting to open. Inside each leaf bud are tiny, curled up leaves. Inside each flower bud are all of the parts of an apple flower. Apple flowers are pink and white and sweet to smell, and each flower is the beginning of an apple. So here you can see the little buds sleeping in the winter, but every piece of the apple are inside. And now you can see in the spring when all of the flowers are blooming on the apple trees, every flower is actually going to be an apple. When spring comes, there are more hours of sunlight. The days are longer and warmer, and the leaf buds begin to open. Tiny green leaves appear on each twig, and when the apple tree is covered with leaves, the flower buds begin to open. Up close, you can see branches of small pink and white flowers at the end of each twig. Each flower can become an apple, but all the right things must happen first. An apple flower has many parts, and each has a special job to do. Around the outside are the sepals. They form a little cup to protect the rest of the flower, and as the flower blossoms, the sepals open too. The pretty colored petals and sweet flowery smell bring many insects and birds to the apple tree. These animal helpers are needed for flowers to make fruit. Inside each flower are the male and female parts that make a new apple grow. The male parts are called stamens. Each flower has many stamens. If you look inside an apple flower, you can see all of the stamens sticking up in a circle. At the top of each stamen, pollen is made. Pollen is a yellow powder. Each flower has thousands of pollen grains, and each grain of pollen holds male cells. So you can see here, inside the center of the flower are all of the stamens, and up close at the top of the stamen is where the pollen is found. The female part of the flower is called the pistil. You can see some of the pistil right at the center of the flower. The pistil has tiny tubes with sticky tops. At the bottom of the flower, out of sight, these tiny tubes meet. The place where the tube meets is called the ovary, and the ovary is the part of the pistil that holds the female cells. The ovary will become the inside core of the apple. So down here at the base where you can see all of the stamens on the top, the pistils are the tubes that run down here, and then this little ball down here is called the ovary, and that is what is going to be the apple core. An apple can grow when the male cells join with the female cells and the flower is fertilized. The male cells from the pollen have to reach the female cells in the ovary. This sounds really easy, but it's not. The apple flower can be fertilized only by the pollen from a different apple tree. Since apple trees don't have legs and can't move, they can't carry the pollen themselves, so they need helpers for the job. So be thinking right now, what helpers could the Lord use to move pollen from this apple tree all the way to the pollen to this apple tree? Bees, of course. Bees are some of the apple tree's best helpers. Bees are attracted to all of the colorful petals of the flowers, and they like the smell of the sweet flower juice called nectar. Bees fly from tree to tree collecting nectar, and they will use the nectar to make honey, of course. As the bees gather nectar, pollen grains stick to their little bodies, and when they land on the flowers of other apple trees, some of the pollen falls off. So you can see that the bees collecting the pollen here pick up pollen on their bodies as they're collecting the nectar to make their honey. And then the bee will fly to another apple tree, and some of the pollen from this tree will fall onto the pollen of this tree. The grains of pollen land on all of the sticky tops of the pistil's tubes. The male cells in the pollen grains travel down these tiny tubes, and at the bottom they reach the ovary. Remember, that was the big ball at the base of the flower. Here, the male cell joins with the female cells, and then the flower is fertilized. Now all of the petals fall to the ground. The petals are no longer needed because they have done their job. The flower has been fertilized, and now an apple will begin to grow. It will grow right on the spot where the flower meets the stem. As the fertilized ovary grows bigger and bigger, it forms the apple's core, which holds all of the apple seeds. They will be well protected here. Around the ovary, the rest of the apple is swelling too. This is all of the white, fleshy part of the apple that you can eat. So if you were to cut open this ovary, you would see inside the white part of the apple that you eat, as well as the seeds and the core right down the center. If you look at the bottom of a ripe apple, you can see bits of the dried sepals left from the flower. When the apple is cut open, you can see the seeds. If you look carefully, you'll see 5 little compartments or sections. There may be as many as 10 seeds inside your apple. The seeds are the fertilized female cells, and apple seeds can grow into new apple trees. So here at the base of the apple is where you can see part of the sepals. And then if you cut your apple open, inside you will see the 5 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It looks like a little star. The apple tree must feed the growing apples. By using sunlight, water, and air, the leaves make a special kind of sugar. This sugar feeds the fruit. It takes about 50 leaves to make the sugar for just one apple. All summer long, the apples grow bigger and riper. And then when fall arrives, the apples are almost ripe. During the last few weeks, the apples can feed themselves. They make their own sugar now. The sugar makes the apples very sweet. Sunlight helps the leaves and the apples to make food. It also helps to change the skin color of some apples. Different kinds of apples have different skin colors. Some turn red and others turn yellow, and some varieties of apples stay green even when they are ripe. So if you look here, this is a red delicious, a McIntosh, a golden delicious, and a Granny Smith apple. Some are very sweet and some are a little bit sour. When the apples are ripe, it is time for picking. If no one picks the apples, they will fall to the ground. Animals will eat some of them and may carry the apple seeds to other places. Some of these seeds will grow into new apple trees. Some of the apples may just rot on the ground. After a while, they will become part of the soil. They will help to feed the tree. And as fall ends, the trees will lose their leaves. New buds are already forming, and they will be next year's apples. For now, the apple tree's work is over. For you, it's time for the best part. It's apple eating time. So boys and girls, if you have an apple at your house, I would love for you to take some time and study it. You could look at the stem of the apple, which is how the apple was hanging from the tree. You could also look at the bottom where you were learning that little bits and pieces are still left from how the apple grew in the tree. You could even cut your apple open and look at the seeds and the 5 parts that make the star or the center of the core of the apple. So I'd love for you to take some time and investigate an apple if you have one at your house. If not, your mommy or daddy could print the Giving Tree paper from the website or from our Google Classroom, and you could use your fingers and either green or yellow or red, whatever your favorite color apple is, and you could make little dots on your tree to make little apples for an art project. So I hope you enjoyed learning how an apple tree is grown and how apples form. I think it's so interesting how the Lord has made every little piece of the apple growth so perfectly, and He has even created little animals like bumblebees and other animals that eat the apples to spread the seeds and help them grow. So enjoy learning, enjoy exploring, and I hope you get outside and take a peek at some other trees that are around your house. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.